Time has produced some of the most incredible humans to walk the face of this planet we call home. People who've endured the most harrowing ordeals, pushing their body to the extreme. Whether it's plane crashes, abduction, jungle survival, or even medical anomalies, we explore them all. Who are these people? What happened? Where are they now? Join us to find out. Not Me, Not Today podcast.
Hey guys, it's Leisha and Kenny here, and you're listening to the first episode of Not Me, Not Today podcast.
Hello, thanks for listening wherever you are in the world. So, Leisha, what's the story?
I'm going to tell you the story of Juliane Koepcke. This was the first survivor story I read as a child. I was like 8 in school and so fascinated by it that it set off my passion for survivor stories. This one is such a good story and one that many people will know. We're going to cover her upbringing, the incident, the relationship with her father afterwards, and what Juliane has been doing with her second chance at life.
Sounds good. Let's get right into it.
Now, before we start, I just want to say that I'm going to try my best to get these people's names correct and how to pronounce them. This is what I've heard it pronounced as before. Juliane Koepcke. However, if it is wrong, I do apologise. I tried.
That's fair.
I want to start off by telling you all about her parents, because they really do factor into a large part of her life. Her parents were German, and their names were Maria and Hans Wilhelm Koepcke. They were married and complete polar opposites. Maria, her mother, was elegant, kind, gentle, and compassionate. She was a major animal lover and had a particular passion for birds. She was so impassioned by birds that she made it a career choice and became an ornithologist. Juliane was super close to her mom and saw her as a bit of a role model. There were a few photos I found of her online, which I'm just going to show Kenny now, and she just seems like such a happy person. She just has one of those faces that really comes to life when she smiles.
Yeah, very animated smile. She's also holding like an interesting looking bird in this picture.
Hans, her father, wasn't as open and loving, being described by Juliane as dark and emotionally awkward, easily angered. He was a real strict disciplinarian who was very much the man of the house, but again, this is the 1950s, so I'm not shocked. I also read something about him going to Peru for his own incredible journey, straight after World War II, but I never really could find the details. Her father, however, did have a much softer side to him and was also extremely passionate about nature. So much so that, like Maria, he also made it a career and was a biologist. Her parents married in Lima, Peru in 1950.
It's the capital city, right?
It is, and that's where they lived. Hans was 10 years older than Maria, and apparently despite their major personality differences, their unified love of nature made them a perfect match. Juliane described them as inseparable, in love, and like a fairy tale. They were both world-renowned scientists, heading up a department each in the National History Museum in Lima, frequently hosting dinner parties and using their house as a stopping point for scientists in the area.
Oh, wow. Interesting conversations at those parties, I'm sure, with all those minds in one place.
Yeah, I have found a quote from a visitor that I feel really gives such a good insight into what their house was like.
Cool.
The intensity of these meetings at Casa Humboldt, over a cup of hot tea and German pastries. These were heated, passionate exchanges. Our conversations were uttered in a quick-fire mixture of German and Spanish, plus the Latin names of birds and other creatures. As the evening went on, Maria's normally pale cheeks would become rosy and her eyes aglow with excitement.
Oh, the anecdotes of those gatherings.
Well, according to Juliane, they were so inseparable that they worked together in the Museum of National History. And when they went to event functions, they would always have to be seated next to one another. Apparently, they would speak to people individually, but it was their thing that they would always eat together. They even had a species of lizard named after them. Microphilus Koepckeolum.
And now say that 3 times really fast.
I struggled to say it once. Juliane was born on the 10th of October, 1954. She was an only child, but grew up with a pet parrot as her sibling. His name was Tobias, and she said that he used to be very jealous of her as a child because he was there before her, and her parents naturally gave more attention to Juliane when she was born and growing up. However, with her parents being such esteemed scientists, animals and nature were always going to be a part of Juliane's life. Her mother sent a letter to a friend in Germany telling her that Juliane had a herbarium at 5 years old.
What is that exactly?
I had to Google that, and a herbarium, for those who aren't sure, is a collection of preserved plant specimens, usually for the purpose of studying.
Okay.
She grew up going to a German international school in Lima, but in 1968, when Juliane was 14, they all moved to Panguana in the Amazon rainforest, which I looked up how far from Lima, Peru it is, and it's 371 kilometers or 230 miles away. It was in the dead-ass middle of nowhere.
Wow.
Now, Panguana is an actual place today, and we will discuss that later on, but I need to describe this place to you when they got there, because it's just wild and must have been quite the change for Juliane. It's also named after a local bird. I'll put up pictures on our Facebook and Instagram of this hut, because it really is basic and must have been quite the adjustment. There were jungle vines, birds, howler monkeys.
It must have been crazy to just move there. Imagine waking up and looking out to see all of that.
I know. Well, when they first arrived, it was a wooden shack. A full-on wooden shack on stilts with palm tree leaves for a roof that had been abandoned by locals. It also had a little side shack, which was a kitchen-type room surrounded by dense Amazon jungle. It had books, no running water, and they had a routine of shaking out their boots for poisonous spiders each morning.
Nice.
So the plan was that they were going to stay in Panguana for 5 years, which didn't exactly go to plan, but I'll get to that in a few minutes. When Juliane was there, she essentially became a jungle child and learned a lot. She spent her mornings being homeschooled by her parents. Her dad taught her maths, and then she would join them in the jungle afterwards. Juliane said that her parents were workaholics, and she would spend much of the time learning survival skills or learning about the jungle and everything within it.
For the average teenager, that would be their worst nightmare. I bet Juliane was in her element, though.
It really does sound like something from Jumanji, doesn't it? So is it here in Jumanji that she had all the experiences she would need to later survive in the jungle? Things like picking up your feet to not trip over roots and identifying plants and animals. One of the stories that Juliane told when I watched her documentary was about expeditioners near her camp. She was about 15 and there were a team of 3 American expeditioners exploring the jungle nearby. One of them had a gun go off accidentally and hit him in the leg. They sent the 3rd man for help.
Ooh, the worst place to get injured, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, 3 days later, he shows up at the Raggedy Shack in the middle of nowhere, and when Juliane's father asked how he found them or survived, he said that he stuck to the river and water sources because if he followed them, they would lead to a village or settlement eventually. Something Juliane would never forget, and advice that her father repeated to her. Whilst they were living in the middle of nowhere, her father put in an application for Panguana to be made into a nature reserve, which was subsequently denied. Between that and the educational authorities, not thrilled at Juliane being homeschooled, relatively unmonitored, in the middle of the jungle, they were forced to move away, only 18 months after they got there. Her parents were less than ecstatic about it.
So they just packed up and went back to Lima?
Yeah, Juliane then went back to her school in Lima, Peru, and rejoined her friends. She studied for her exams and just got to be a normal teenage girl for a little while again. During this time she was home, her parents hadn't forgotten or given up on their Panguana project. Instead, they saw being forced to move back to Lima as a hiccup, and as soon as Juliane finished her exams, they intended to go back.
Pining for Panguana.
They were. Her father put in an application for it to become a research centre. This got approved, but in 1972, after the incident happened. The Koepckes were waiting on Juliane to finish her exams so they could all pack up as a family and relocate to this shack in the middle of nowhere, this remote location that they intended on converting to a nature reserve or research station. Juliane wanted to attend her graduation and prom after her exams, because, well, why not? I mean, you've worked so hard to study and to graduate, you want to at least be able to enjoy the celebration, to be a normal teenager, before you're made to bippity-boppity boop yourself back into the jungle like Jane from Tarzan. So her mother agreed to let her stay for those things, but her father had some work and preparation to do in Panguana. He went ahead of them. The plan was that Juliane and her mother attend the graduation, Juliane gets to go to the ball, and they all fly over to be together as a family for Christmas. They all live happily ever after. The plan changed from them flying out on the 19th of December to flying out on the 24th, 1971, Christmas Eve.